Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, well, got a lot of fun in store for tonight. Yeah, we get to take a look at let's see how they phrase it in particular, the 8 root afflictions. So when we were taking refuge, we commented on the 6 perfections, ethics, generosity, ethics, so forth. We just said that. Now we get to talk about the 6 root afflictions, kind of on the opposite spectrum. For me, I think it's so wonderful that we have an opportunity to just be handed, well, here's kind of the problem. Oh, okay, I can stop doing that maybe. Not as easy as that, but at least I've got something to work with. So I've always appreciated such a clarity around the root causes of my mental and emotional struggles. And so we're probably familiar with the 3 root poisons. You'll see them in here, but this is the 6 root afflictions. Let's see what His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has to say about it. Studying the laboratory that is our mind, we notice that we can have radically different emotions at different times. We can be loving one moment and irritated the next. Some emotions arise more easily or are more habitual than others. Our anger surges in a moment. Fortitude is difficult to cultivate. Some emotions bring peace. Others disturb our mental tranquility. The latter are called afflictions. The Sangha identifies these in his compendium of knowledge. So remember, when we're talking about afflictions, anything that's moving us away from peace and ease is afflicted. An affliction is defined as a phenomenon that, when it rises, is disturbing in character, and that, through arising, disturbs the mind stream. Believe it or not, there's actually people who can walk around in peace like most of the time. They're few in number, but they exist. And hard to imagine, huh? And so anything moving away from that's afflicting. Afflictions are distinct mental factors that, when they arise in our minds, cause our minds to be unpeaceful and unsubdued. Afflictions may be emotions, attitudes, or views, and they usually arise without our choice. The 3 principal afflictions are ignorance, anger, and attachment. So again, those 3 root poisons. Those are the core 3 from which all of samsara is our experience. Although compassion may disturb our minds, it isn't an affliction. Genuine compassion, as opposed to pity or personal distress when seeing others suffer, is deliberately cultivated for a good purpose and is supported by reasoning. Unable to ignore sentient beings' dukkha, compassion wishes them to be free of it. Our minds may be temporarily disturbed because our apathy has been challenged. But this type of mental disturbance spurs us to be more tolerant and kind. So it has a purpose if we use it wisely. It makes our mind strong and is determined to aid others and brings benefit to ourselves and others. Afflictions, on the other hand, arise without good reasons and lack foundation in reality. Because we are habituated with afflictions, they arise easily when we encounter certain conditions. They disturb the tranquility of the mind and have long-term effect of increasing our problems and unhappiness. Unlike virtuous mental states such as integrity and compassion, afflictions lack mental clarity, and we often find ourselves justifying their presence. I have a right to be angry because he criticized me unfairly. But think about it. Why must we be angry when someone criticizes us? Is anger the only possible response to this situation? Does anger increase our ability to communicate well or destroy? Questioning ourselves in this way clears away confusion and enables us to see the faulty logic behind the afflictions and thus dispel them. So he's making this point around just rational reasoning, wisdom, understanding, things that sometimes we don't even look at, right? Of course, I have a right to be angry. Look at that. It's an unfair thing. Sure, you have a right to be, but how helpful is it? And is it necessary? And, often we don't even think about these things, right? We're just, well, of course. I'll bring it a little further, but yeah, one of the questions I was asked, and it was in San Diego, yeah, Dharma Center there, about justifiable anger. Yeah, we'll see what happens here first. I didn't get a chance to pre-read this, so I'll see where he's going first. Afflictions give rise to actions that are considered destructive in all cultures, such as killing, stealing, and lying. These actions perpetuate the cycle of misery. Because they bring our ruin, we need to be aware of their nature, causes, functions, and disadvantages. If a country has an enemy that is destroying its well-being, it tries to learn everything it can about the enemy in order to combat it and prevent it from devastating the country. Similarly, we need to know everything we can about the enemy, the afflictions that destroy our own and others' happiness. But simply learning about the afflictions is not sufficient. We must also combat them by hearing, thinking, and meditating on their counter forces as described in the Buddhist teachings. Doing this is the crux of Dharma practice. So he just snuck in there the three wisdoms: hearing, thinking about, and meditating. First wisdom, hearing the teaching. Second wisdom, analyzing it, getting a realization about it, and then meditating on that realization, three wisdoms. So that's always this method. Because, we can all know a bunch of good stuff at, 6:26 p.m. on a mountain time, and at 9:26 p.m., not remember it. But if we were to observe it, think about it, realize some bit of wisdom, meditate on that, then do that again and again, it can go from just a philosophical idea to a realized experience as we apply it. So those three wisdoms are really an important process. The Buddha listed 84,000 afflictions, the most prominent of which are the root afflictions and auxiliary afflictions. In the Treasury of Knowledge, Vasubandhu spoke of 6 root afflictions, the last one being afflictive views, which in turn is subdivided into 5. Doing all the math here. In the Compendium of Knowledge, his older brother Sangha listed 10 root afflictions. The first 5 that Vasubandhu listed plus 5 afflicted views. Although the two lists come to the same point, there are some differences in how a few of the afflictions are described because the Treasury of Knowledge was written from. Anyway, we're getting all in the weeds here a bit because we're going to focus on the 6. So let's just pause there for a moment and justifiable anger. Yeah, what about justifiable anger? And I find that a fascinating construct. is there anything that you can do to me that would justify me being miserable?
Hit you with 2x4.
That would allow me to hurt. And so, but if I keep thinking about how Sam hit me with a 2x4 and have a resentment from it, get angry about it, who's suffering? I'm never going to forgive him. I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life. And so, is there anything that you can do that justifies like the anger versus another response, right?
If I keep hitting you with 2x4.
It'll hurt a lot if Sam keeps hitting me with a 2x4, and I do my best to take it from you. So this idea then of justifiable anger means there's a difference between maybe valid anger, right? Anger's arising for a reason, so that's always why it arises. There's a reason for it. But justifiable meaning in the sense that I can stay angry. Okay, so anger arises, can't do anything about that. But then I start justifying it and saying why I'm angry. Well, of course I have a reason to be angry. What am I doing? I'm nurturing anger, and anger is an unpleasant state of being, right? And so I'm actually perpetuating the anger and justifying why I'm angry and keeping it alive. And so I'm miserable longer, as opposed to, yeah, of course, I get hit with a 2x4 by Sam. Did you on purpose?
Yeah.
Okay, did it on purpose to hurt me. So anger, well, first pain arises, and maybe defense. Might take a minute to get to anger, right? Because you got to do all the defending yourself, get the 2x4 away if I can. And then after the event, right after the shock, after the pain and all that, then I start going, why did he hit me with a 2x4? And then get angry, right? So that actually might come much later. But then I nurture it. After all I've done for Sam, he sent me with a 2x4. And now, anger, resentment, frustration. And yeah, I can justify it. Is that helpful? Does it help me be happier? Does it help me move on with my life? Or do I just carry it with me?
So we're saying justifiable anger isn't justifiable?
Saying you can justify it, but it may not be very helpful. Matter of fact, it might be detrimental to justify it. And in other words, more around justifiable anger, I'm going to carry resentment for a long time, anger for a long time, and I keep justifying it as though it has some big purpose for me. But what's it really doing? It's robbing me of my peace and joy and well-being and inability to move on because maybe that event happened last week or last year or 2 years. But how often do we carry something with us from 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or what somebody did with me? And so often we don't question, instead of justifying, maybe I can give myself permission to let go of it and stop suffering. Maybe I can forgive. And so there's always these interesting discussions, especially around anger. I think I've mentioned a few times, I was on a panel once in Findlay, Ohio, multi-faith panel. I was the Buddhist guy, for the record. And we had all these people, Muslim, Christians, and about anger and justifiable anger and so forth. And is anger sort of necessary was the big question. And I said, no. And everybody got angry about that. I found really funny. And then the whole next hour was everybody justifying anger. And the audience was getting pissed off. And how anger, can be moved to do something positive, right? That serves a purpose, right? So, and it does, it's trying to remove something. And so, yeah, as a matter of fact, even one guy said, what about genocide right now? World War II, people got angry and fought back, to free people from the internment camps. I know. Do they have anger, or could they do that out of compassion? Well, yeah, I don't want people to suffer. I want to remove them, right? And so the point isn't that anger, anger does happen, obviously. What do we do with it? And is it the only response that we need? And so my position at that conference was, is there anything that I can do out of anger that I couldn't do more effectively out of compassion? When you're angry, you have very little option. When you're angry, we say stuff, we do stuff, we get physical, we, say hurtful things. I mean, we have a very narrow focus. It's very hard to have a spectrum to respond. When you have compassion, you're much more into problem solving, much wider capacity to, take a different approach or solve the problem or address an issue. You have a lot more bandwidth.
How would you attack a foe with compassion?
So wrathful compassion is I've broken up fights, and restrained people to keep them from harming people. And but my thing is to stop the suffering. So it's not out of anger, I want to hurt the person. Out of compassion, I want to stop the person from hurting someone, right? So it doesn't mean you don't get physical even.
Like in war or something.
Yeah, so in war, and again, if what's your motivation here, right? Are we trying to free people from an internment camp? And can, some people may surrender, some people are attacking you. Do you defend yourself? If you go all the way back to All Quiet on the Western Front, people remember that, or am I just an old person? Okay, I'm an old person. But it's a great movie on World War I, and it's where basically these two soldiers get stuck in trench warfare, which was horrific, and then they get into this fight. It's just the two of them in this little hole, and the one guy stabs, the German guy basically, and it's kind of a slow death. He has to sit next to him as he dies, and at a point he kind of finds in his wallet the picture of his girlfriend and the notes, and what he basically comes to realize is this guy's my age, my life. The only difference is he was born in Germany and I was born in the US. And the humanity of it. It's like, wow, we're killing each other, but we're just like each other. And the only difference is where we were born. They're just soldiers. They're not the people, creating the conditions. And so, even I think, people being in service and how they approach, what we have to do, but what's our motivation? And you can even rationalize to a degree having to kill someone, to save other lives, right? But it's not out of hatred, it's out of compassion to save these other lives. Tricky business, though, because we can also then justify a lot in front. But just going back to what His Holiness was pointing out here with anger is, he's not even saying it. He's just starting with the point that so much of it is habitual, we don't question that we could have a different response. There might be a more productive way. And, a lot of times we, as humans, and I was taught, it's this sort of justifiable anger. And never question the fact that maybe I don't need it. It'll rise, but I don't need to nurture it, grow it. Yeah.
I haven't seen the movie, but I will. But I just read the book Night by Salman Rushdie. It is really good. And it's all about that because the guy knifed him and took his eye. And then he had Well, you didn't even know of.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to get over that.
So for those of you online, that was just a comment about a book, Knife by Salman Rushdie. Pronounce the last name?
Pretty sure Rushdie.
Salman Rushdie. Yeah, Rushdie. I can never get it right. So, but yeah, similar type of experience. So we're just opening the door here around afflictive states, and sometimes as we work our way through, we realize, well, this is afflicted. It's not helping me. It's not serving a purpose. It doesn't serve me in my own life. Whereas in the past, we may have never questioned. Somebody does something, we complain about it, our friends validate it. We get to nurture and grow it instead of address, well, can we do something or not? Yeah.
This might be opening a can of worms.
We're all about opening cans of worms. That's
Great.
what we're here for.
Maybe you've already answered this, so maybe I just need to hear it again in different words, but I guess why are we habituated with these afflictions, or why do we have this? It seems like it almost like this compulsion to like react and feel like we only have one type of possible response.
Mhm. Yeah, so did you guys online hear that or no? Okay. Some of you did, some of you didn't. Oh, some of you. So, but the question is really about why we have these afflictions, why we're so conditioned, why we're so reactive. And certain people have a different response than another person. I think that's where we're going.
Okay, cool.
So let's
Great.
see what His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has to say before John. And Venerable Thubten Chodron. So. He begins with attachment. So attachment is a mental factor that, based on distorted attention, that exaggerates the attractiveness of a polluted object, which basically is everything you're experiencing. A polluted object, an object under the influence of ignorance, wishes for and takes a strong interest in it. That's a fancy way of saying we really attribute a lot of qualities and values to this person, this thing, that event that doesn't have. We just think, wow, if I have this, my life's going to be really good. And if I don't have it, it's going to be miserable. If this person's in my life, I'll be happy. And if this person's not in my life, I'm going to be. So we're attributing, we're exaggerating the qualities and attributes of the object. Be it a person or a place, or it could be praise or an idea. Attachment functions to produce discontent. Isn't that funny? It actually functions great discontent, not happiness. And perpetuate the cycle of existence. Looking at our own experiences, we can see how true this is. Let's see what he says about it, and I'll give some examples. This is a general description of attachment. There are many degrees and variations of attachment, not to be confused with a healthy attachment, right? In psychology, we have like attachment theory. We're not talking about that. That's a Western construct, different kind of thing we're talking about. Some instances of attachment that arise in daily life are greed that wants more than our fair share. Attachment to our ideas. I'm sure none of us have that issue. That's for those other people. That leads to stubborn insistence on being right. Attachment to reputation, praise, pleasing sensory experiences, and so on. We also become attached to people, which leads to having unrealistic expectations of them or of our relationships with them. This in turn leads to disappointment and friction in those relationships and feelings of bitterness or betrayal when the relationships don't continue as expected. Covetousness, whew. None of us have that thing, I'm sure, is a coarse form of attachment. As one of the 10 non-virtues, covetousness easily leads to actions that directly harm others, such as stealing or unwise sexual relationships. Other afflictions derived from attachment are miserliness, that doesn't want to share our possessions. Haughtiness, you don't hear that word very often. Haughtiness is an attachment to our good fortune, and restlessness that distracts the mind to desirable objects during meditation. So just pausing there before we go on, you can almost see how we can become habituated with that, right? I feel good when this happens. Okay, I want more of that. I feel terrible when this happens. I don't want that. And so we start being conditioned from little kids, I mean, little kid may not want the split pea Gerber food, might want the carrots instead. And we start forming, and then the perception is that carrot stuff's making me happy. Those split peas, not so much. And so from early on, we're already attributing what's happiness, what's suffering, who's nice to me, who's not, what feels good in the body, what doesn't, who gives me praise, who criticizes. These types of people are like that. And from early on, we start building a response mechanism, right? And even people who remind us of those people. And then, those kinds of people make me happy. These kinds of people don't. And so it becomes very habituated early on. And the attachments are all around the exaggerated qualities and sneaky stuff, right? So, I mean, we can think of big things, but for example, I walked in to the building today. I was someone I had met before, talking, and we're walking. She goes, "Yeah, I'm getting an e-bike today. The Clear, they've got these subsidies, big grant, and I'm getting one really cheap." And coming in, and I'm sitting here thinking, I didn't know about that, right? You could easily go from, wow, she's getting an e-bike for, I don't know, like $125, right? They're expensive. To, I don't have one, right? A minute before, you didn't have anything to think about an e-bike, and now you do, right? And now there's like, whoa, I wish I'd have known about that. And then somebody could easily go to coveting or discontent or all that, All right, so how quickly that can go on just a very simple thing. And then I saw these people walking out with their new little kits for their e-bikes, right? And I didn't dwell on it. Well, let's go. But I did notice, I wonder, do I have time? No, I don't have time. We're doing Dharma. Okay, move on. And I actually thought about the fact I get to ride those little electric weed cycles for free, right? In our town, we have these little setups we can do. Have you ever done that?
Where do you get them to ride them for free?
We have little stations all around
Oh,
town.
they're free though?
They're
all
free.
Free all the time, okay.
Yeah, for 30 minutes.
30 minutes is free.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, you don't want to go over 30 minutes
And
because
then you
that's
bring it
crazy.
back.
Yeah.
And if you
So
don't-
you drive, like, you ride it to the market. There's a station there, so it's less than 30 minutes. Then you can go to, like, I go down to the meeting, park it there. You get a new one, you drive it. So they're all over. You
What
just,
happens if you're out more than 30 minutes?
you get charged. I think, yeah,
How do they know who's on?
you're on an app, you get registered, yeah. And so I don't want to spend the whole Dharma talk on the Wii cycle, but anyway, the point being is that my mind did go to gratitude rather than discontent. So I started thinking how cool it is I can just hop on it. Matter of fact, one night, okay, we're on the Wii cycle for a minute. Laura and I, it was the evening, and we were kind of tired and stuff. I thought, let's just get one and go to a different station and then go to another station and just jump on bikes and go. Eventually, we needed to go to the market, but we didn't want to go straight to the market. So we just drove to different stations and then eventually went to the market. And we had a whole evening of just riding.
Are they electric?
Most of them are, yeah, electric boost. Yeah. Okay, so does everyone out there online have covetousness over our we cycle experience that we have in Carbondale, where you can just hop on a bike for free and ride it somewhere. Pretty sad, huh? Yeah. Why don't you guys get that?
Mm.
So we do this all the time too. So attachment is really, you're going to get to the core of almost all the rest of the things. Because I think, man, I'd be really happy if we had those e-bike things. But before I even talked about it, you weren't even thinking about it. And so discontent, the whole thing builds discontent. I'm really happy when I have it for a little bit. And then if it's lost, I'm really unhappy. And then it also loses its luster usually over time. I was thinking today about, I have these computers, old laptops that, I got to figure out what to do. I want to get them deleted and do whatever you do to recycle them. But, I'm sitting there thinking there's probably some good stuff on there from way back when. So you don't want to give it up. But I haven't even seen it in years. You don't want to give it up. But, it's it. And then you could see where, what could be important, except you haven't even thought about it in 3 or 4 years, 5 years, right? Is it really that important?
Could be.
Yeah, could be that important. Oh my. And so does that bring serenity or discontent? And how much stuff do we have in our closets, that we don't even look at but man, this is a treasure, I'm saving it. And our relationships that change and how we exaggerate those and things that we do. So, but it's always based, and he started with this, on something that doesn't hold up to reason. That object, that person, that thing can never provide you with the lasting happiness you're exaggerating its qualities to be. Even when you get that great job, then after a while you have to go to work. So I always find, man, I have to go to work today. Remember how excited you were when you got that job? And then some days you want to go, other days we're grateful we have it. Some days it's fun, some days it's not. And just the whole journey around attachments to everything, cars, people in our lives, the events that we get to go to or not go to. And should I really rain on your parade or just kind of pause? No, I'll just leave it there. So, but the point of this is always thinking about what's realistic. What would it be like to just appreciate something without needing it? What would it be like to appreciate it without trying to put claw marks and hang on to it? To just know it's temporary, know it is joyful when you have it, and but not be attached to needing it. That your happiness isn't coming from it. Then you might actually get to enjoy it. I mean, anyone who's ever been in any kind of long-term relationship, man, if I could just get them to do what I want, it would just be so dynamite. But they're so uncooperative, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And and relationships are work, and their ups and their downs, but what if I just accepted my partner and wanted the best for them and appreciated the time we had? Well, wouldn't that be different? Instead of keeping track of who did the dishes last, and blah, 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 keeping score, you did what, so, we can do better at these things, and we can start to recognize, how much attachment's based on something that's really unrealistic versus appreciation for something while we have it in that moment, without trying to cling on and try to save it, make it that way again, go back to the way it was, preserve something, when everything's changing all the time, trying to make something not change. when everything's changing all the time. And then how much does attachment pop up? Just, like I said, with the, well, you can go get an e-bike right now or whatever. And but if I didn't know about that, I was pretty happy. How you know about it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's discontent, right? So attachments is really sneaky thing, and I think much more tricky, as Tenzin Palmo always points out, than anger. Anger we're motivated to work on because it's not very pleasant. We're not very motivated to work on attachment. And so Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, she has this thing where she says, people come to me all the time to work on their anger. Nobody ever comes to me to work on their greed. And yet it's the greed that's causing the anger and the discontent and the frustration, and the attachment. Sneaky. All right, I'm just going to pause there, see if anyone has any thoughts or comments before I return to the text. And I'm trying to get my screen back to where I can see some of you. All right. And we have a comment or a thought before we carry on.
I think it's so liberating, like that you had that clarity to see that. Like I caught myself the other day. I want to have a family one day and want to be able to pay for childcare if I'm working. And I'm just like, how much money do I need to make every year to be able to do that here or in a different place? And just kind of like jogging a few years ahead. And then I had this thought, I was driving and I was like, if I was able to pay for that and like 2 vacations a year, I was just like thinking about what kind of money do I need to make to have this kind of life? And then I thought about, I had this sneaking suspicion that even if I achieved those things, because of the way this attachment works, it still wouldn't, I could achieve those things and it wouldn't be, though it would lose its luster. Then I would be like, I want more, I want this in addition. And it was liberating because I was like, oh, like it just kind of gets you, that like check gets you off of that treadmill. And it just, I don't know what else to say, but I really appreciate that teaching. So, yeah.
Yeah, the treadmill is a good analogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you're talking, what's happening when I'm thinking about what I want and what I would like, I'm not seeing what I have. Here we are in this beautiful community and look at all we have. Like we have Wii cycles. A lot of these people don't have Wii cycles. And but the moment, like we could be in total appreciation, gratitude, and then our mind goes to what I don't have, right? And now we're missing everything we do have. So that's how it creates discontent immediately. Well put, though. I'm so glad you got free. You got liberated.
I think I did for a little bit.
Making back on that treadmill. Probably.
You got a little break.
Yeah.
All right, Keith or Kurt.
Sure.
It's Keith. We don't have Wii bikes here. Gee,
Oh man,
feeling pretty
I'm
envious and bad.
feeling so sad for you guys.
And could you put a down payment on one of those cheap e-bikes
I
for
want
us
the
too,
e-bike.
please? Just hold it for us. Just back to the previous discussion, in all seriousness, about killing. This is a question that I have some confusion about. I understand about motivation. So let's say, the Allied forces that came in to conquer Germany to free, the people from the camps and had to kill a lot of people along the way to accomplish that. Even with the purest motivation of compassion, that's clearly why they were doing that. Is there karmic debt still? And is it justified, in the Dharma?
Yeah, so good question. These are the big things that we get to wrestle with in life. And we also have to remember that different people are at different places for different reasons, karmically, right? So for me, I'm not in the military. I can't ever see me killing anyone for any reason whatsoever. Or, I actually was able to get a fly out of the house the other night. So, I figure if they're stuck in here, they're going to die. But anyway, so, I'm not going to kill anybody. I don't see that. But someone else in a different state of being, and I did actually join the military. I got 4F 2 days before I busted my knee, 2 days before my entry date. So my karma was a different deal. I didn't wind up going that path. And I have almost killed a couple of people actually in person on purpose in my more violent recovery life. Yeah. And literally held a knife to someone's throat. I mean, just so I could have gone either way, but my karma didn't ripen that way. And now I couldn't even conceive of it. I don't think I could fend off Sam hitting me with a 2x4. And so, but someone who is a soldier and who is, coming in, there's gonna be karma related to that. It's always around the varying degrees. And so there's this, there's not ever any black and white. There is the sense of, negative karmic imprint of killing. There's going to be some karma. There's karma for everything we do. But to the degree with which it is negative or wholesome is always going to be variable. We had, I think, a nice discussion at our 7-point mind training on even suicide, right? So standard form, that's killing, it's killing yourself. And it can be extremely harmful, especially if I do it, in a way that's really going to affect my loved ones and I don't tell them, and, it's gruesome or it's, difficult and I'm in emotional pain. A lot of karma around that. But if I'm elderly or I have a terminal illness and I'm really thinking about how to take care of my loved ones, and I'm going to die anyway, it's very clear, it's painful. I'm not worried so much about the pain. I'm more thinking about others, and I include them in a process of doing this together and want it to be a unified thing that we do and all that. There's still going to be some karma, but a very different thing, right? So all the situations that we find ourselves in, I quoted Tuesday, to never let your sense of morality keep you from doing the right thing. Nothing's black and white, right? And so in this situation that I'm in, what's the healthy choice for me? And so, I didn't wind up in the military. I didn't wind up going into combat. That would have been Gulf War stuff. And some people did. And then in those situations, are they, how they kill and what their mindsets are, it's all going to be very multifaceted and, hard to tell. But what we can always be very clear about is if it's done in anger, it's going to have this really negative effect. If it's done out of purpose, with integrity, with, in certain ways, what's your mind at that time is always going to have this huge impact. If you go hardcore fundamentalist, a Buddhist point of view, bodhisattva, you can pretty much say, I'm never going to respond in anger, and do with me, you can torture me. And, some of these Tibetan lamas had been tortured for 20 years in Chinese internment camps. And, there's, you can read about them, and they had compassion for the person torturing them. Okay. I'm not there yet. Okay. But they were. And some of them had even shared that it was the most profound experience of their lives, because they transcended all that kind of hatred and stuff, and really help them achieve awakening. So so you can reach those types of degrees, but these are people who are very advanced in their practice, and they don't suffer the way you and I suffer. There's physical pain, but there's not suffering. And so they're in a very different way of being, a different experience. So we need to be where we're at, and then whatever we're doing, how can we do the least harm? If we can do no harm, that's even better. But it's always one of those situations where we need to not judge someone for where they're at, but recognize where we're at, and understand that even people who have killed many people have found an awakening in the same lifetime. So Milarepas and because they see the damage done, and engage in these practices to offset that. So that's, I think, one of the things that's hard to grasp as a Westerner is Buddhism has no right and wrong. There's just cause and effect. Just cause and effect. So if I'm like I grew up around a lot of violence, a lot of drug addiction, and that was normal for me, right? I had a different view and a perception when I was younger. Later in life, but I was also had a mom who took me to church every Sunday, and so I think she gave me this other opportunity. All my brothers wound up doing well after they did a lot of damage, after prison, after these things, and so these situations that we might be in one day might not be at all the situations we are later in life, and we're always in motion, and karma is not an isolated thing. What we're doing here today is the result of people who gave teachings thousands of years ago, and people who practice teachings over thousands of years, and people who built this building, and people who made the technology. All of this. I mean, when you start to think about how intertwined we are with all the karma and all the conditions, there's not just this one isolated thing. Even what I do is in relationship to all the conditioning, all the events, and what's going on. So not always clean cut. What are very clear is our motivation is going to have a huge impact on the result. And acting out of anger is going to cause harm. I mean, it's pretty hard not to. So I hope that was a clear, unsatisfying answer for you, Keith.
No, that's helpful. Then I could fast forward back to the attachment discussion. I thought that was an interesting use of words, polluted. I think he said polluted objects. I can't remember.
Yeah, everything in samsara is polluted, basically.
And what do you think he means by polluted?
Well, it's affected by
ideas.
karma and klesha. It's all conditioned. It's not pure. It's all conditioned. If we were pure, we wouldn't be here, or we wouldn't experience this. We'd be awakened. So polluted just meaning conditioned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Strong word, huh? They're using that to have us sort of get an adverse response. It's not what we build it up to be. All right, Roxana.
Hi.
Hi.
Something occurred to me while you were having this conversation. My father was a B-17 navigator in World War II, and he was bombing Germany. He ended up getting shot down in Holland and going to a prison camp for 15 months. But for some reason, after that prison camp, they were liberated by the Russians, but they went to a concentration camp, and he saw what that was like. And he was infuriated. But then it occurred to me, if the Allied forces hadn't stopped Hitler, then he would have spread his way of being through France and England and even to the United States. That was his plan. So there could be karma for not doing anything and letting something like that just roll along, or maybe taking on your personal karma in order to try and stop that kind of genocide and murder and all the things he was doing. So it's like your decision, based in compassion or otherwise, has a karmic effect, whether you decide to do something or whether you decide to not do something, right?
Yeah, but yes, and yes, and of course it does. However, the assumption that Hitler would have rolled on and got through all of Europe is an assumption. It never happens. We don't know what would have happened. We don't know if he would have had a heart attack the next day. You know, everything is just made up in my mind about what may, you know, we can think about probabilities, but we really don't know, and it didn't happen. So, but as was pointed out, not taking action was a thing. Watching the trains go by for the concentration camps and not acting, that was actually happening at that time, and being complacent, you know, by not, you know, stepping up, not trying to rescue. Then, you know, that would be more of a current argument like that. The other thing is, so it has been noted that if someone, for example, bodhisattva motivation, saw that someone was about to kill like a lot of people, and actually had, now this is the highest level, this is not just I want to save these other people, but I'm willing to take on any negative karma so that these people can be saved, and I'm going to, you know, kill this other person, and I'm willing to take on the karma. Like that's like, you know, above and beyond, right? And so so that would be like a pure bodhisattva motivation, seeing the harm that could be done, willing to take on negative karma for the benefit of others, and take an action like that. But, you know, these are all interesting philosophical conversations. You know, what we would actually do or not do is can we be kind to our neighbors? Might be a good starting point. And can I develop the heart that recognizes that everyone we meet is suffering just like we are? They all have a disease of this conditioning. They all, you know, some were hugged more than others. Some got a little more love than others. Some were raised in a more difficult environment. Some were raised in a different country with a whole different view I was raised in. And so we're all suffering, right? We're all in dukkha. And so that's the kind of view I like to have, is that we're all in this together. We're all suffering. And so these actions that people take, how can I interact with those actions in the most positive way? And then those become very personal decisions, right? Depending on the situation. And so do we step up, you know, for example, you know, how do we vote? What do we do to, you know, go hear voices that are important in our political system, or climate, or, you know, these types of things that we're facing? You know, can I do it in a way that respects that the other person from their side, what they think makes sense to them, even though it makes absolutely no sense to me? The way they're raised, their conditioning, their environment, the news they get, the things that they have, what they're saying makes sense to them. But they still want happiness like I want happiness. They still want their kids to be okay like I want my kids to be okay. They just have a different understanding of how that happens. based on their conditioning. And then we can operate, I think, more effectively, which doesn't mean that somebody, going to shoot up a school, right? Obviously they're suffering, but what do we do to stop that person? And how do we do it in a healthy way and save people? So these are all deep questions, but as I explore those, how do I be nice to the people I don't like? I mean, that's a ground that we all walk on. And, I think of Condor Rinpoche, who says, if we could just learn to be nice to each other, we wouldn't have all these afflictions. And it gets so simple. Like, how can I be nice to people? And by nice, really have our best interest at heart. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to have my worldview. You don't have to do that. I can just see your value. And being nice also means having boundaries. It's not helpful to let people do harmful things. It's not helpful to let people engage in toxic behavior. It's not helpful. It's not loving. It's not kind. How can I skillfully have a boundary instead of telling them you're an idiot and not do this? Maybe just, that's really an unhealthy way for us to interact. And, if I'm not going to have that conversation with you right now. So can I speak to be heard rather than to offend? So these are all things that we can do to refine, but can I let the fly out the window instead of just killing? Or in my case, I wasn't going to even think about killing, but I was just thinking, it's in here by itself. I don't think it's going to live that long. Maybe it can live a little longer if it's outside. And Laura would be happier. I think it's a big one buzzing around. So anyway, and what we need to remember then is that at the core of this is we are not just this body and we're not just in this experience, and how we're perceiving things isn't the way they are ultimately. But every event that's happening in my life is an opportunity to cultivate compassion and wisdom. And those 6 perfections that we listed that recognize I'm really not independent of that person I don't like. Matter of fact, every view I have about that person has a lot to do with all my conditioning and their aspects too. And how do I interact with that person in a way that's meaningful and productive? Then what are they showing me about my own mind? How are they teaching me? The Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo talks a lot about the analogy that most people in life aren't that helpful because they're pretty nice to us, they're polite, But there's a few people who are just really, get under our skin, mean, vicious, horrible people. And boy, aren't you grateful for them? Like, oh yeah. And her analogy is, if you go to the gym, you go to work out, you don't want to just lay around at the gym. Right? You got to work out. You want to be worked. You want to exercise. You want some benefit. You're not getting that from all the nice people hanging around you. These people show you your mind. They show you your jealousies. They show you your resentments. They show you your judgments. They show you, that how suddenly there's a me and a you. And that they're showing you is the path to awakening. Here's what I get to work on. And so that's a real, powerful thing for me is if I'm not seeing all of you with the same kind of care that I see my grandchildren, what do I need to work on? Because you're all somebody's grandkid, right? And we're in the foxhole together. Right? So wouldn't it be more helpful to see everyone as though they're as valuable as your grandkids or children? They all got hopes and aspirations, and just like me, trying to find a way to be okay. and maybe didn't get some of the benefits I did. And we can start to do that, then all those other bigger questions kind of take care of themselves. And we're not even all the way through attachment.
Is there like a collective karma
Oh yeah.
or is it just like your kind of your own?
No, karma, you have individual karma, but we right now have collective karma from this group and this teaching. We all have this collective karma. We have the karma of Carbondale and of the United States and all that. Everything that we do is, all of this is coming together. And, if you get in an accident, there's the karma of the people who built the car and the cars and whether there's stop signs or not stop signs. It's very complex, interwoven. Yeah. The very personal karma, it, has a lot to do with our motivations and our intentions. And so we can cultivate virtuous activities. And there's the 10 virtues, which Chris asked about. Did you find that, Chris, last week? 10 non-virtues?
I did. Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay, good. So there's a top 10 list, right? 10 non-virtuous things that really do almost all the damage. And then the opposites, the 10 virtuous. And those are really going to be highly productive and so anything about karma, it's going to give a pleasant result or an unpleasant or neutral. So you'll notice there's some things that just don't interest you or people. And some people really, you get like, whoa, they're an idiot. Or, whoa, really like them. And other people, the same person, like them. And I think they're an idiot. So that's going to be your personal karma, is whether you're finding someone kind of pleasurable or not. Or food. Don't even get me started on Brussels sprouts. I know all of you are waiting for that. Not going there. Probably. Yeah. Does that make sense? But those karma can't ripen unless these other conditions show up. So that person who walks in the room, if they don't walk in the room, it didn't ripen. Yeah. But how you see and experience people, places, events as pleasurable or unpleasurable or neutral has a lot to do with your personal karma. Even some people have like a difficult experience, and some people it's not so difficult, right? An injury or something. Some people it's the end of the world. Some people it's, busted my knee, Okay, Keith and Kurt, and then I think we'll get towards wrapping it up.
Never mind. I think I answered my own question. So there you go.
You are a wise one, Kurt.
Yeah, right. I'm sure it's a good answer too. It always is.
Nailed it. That's awesome.
John, I might just step in for a second since
Okay.
Kurt didn't have anything more to say. I didn't know I can't figure out how to raise my hand. Something's changed with my Zoom settings. But I appreciate what you said and what people have been discussing about taking action versus not taking an action. And in our discussion, we were talking about taking action in some examples as perhaps doing something aggressive for the better good of a larger group of people. And it made me think of perhaps like the example of Thich Nhat Hanh during the Vietnam War, where his action was in essence to take no action, but to walk in peace and to try to bring peace amongst the parties that were having conflict. And I guess that just made me think that sometimes taking what we consider no action is actually an action.
It is an action, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I went into a lot of work meetings today, sort of with that intention and mindset that there may be times when I just need to take no action or no comment or no position and just listen. So anyways, it was interesting how it tied into our discussion this evening and other experiences. And
yeah, it's a good example. And I like, you're making such a good point. There is no action or not action. It's a different action, right? And that action that you're talking about not saying something, that's a choice, right? That's an action to not say something. Yeah, thank you for, bringing that up. And yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh, who took a very non-violent action in the midst of war. Chris, I saw your hand go up.
Dude, I thought, well, yeah, I think since Keith and Kurt brought theirs down, I figured I'd just throw this out there. A bit of a, I don't know if it's a point or a question, but like I said, I'm kind of new to the group, and I've been listening to the earlier podcasts. I don't know, they're probably a few years old. You were going over you were reading through the Four Noble Truths book by the Dalai Lama, and you talked a lot about causes and conditions during those talks and reading that book. And I just wanted to say it's been really helpful to me, from anything from attachment to anger to coveting your awesome e-bike program there in Carbondale. I was, as you were talking about it, there was literally, like you said, it's very subtle. It was starting to rise up. I'm like, damn, why don't we have that here? I'm in Richmond, Virginia, of all places. So I just want to say thanks for always, a lot of times in most talks, you come around to causes and conditions, and it always helps me, because I was thinking, when I got covetous about the e-bikes, I started thinking, well, somebody's got to pay for those, right? So there's some taxes, and what was their tax? So I got to start spinning down that road, right? But it helps me a lot with anger and covetousness and some other things to try to slow my mind down and think of the causes and conditions underlying whatever an action or whatever the case may be.
Right. And we can create the causes for a peaceful mind and for appreciation instead of jealousy. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Glad you're here. Let's just take a moment to recognize that we've all cultivated a great deal of merit and collective karma from our time together, all the things we could have been doing on a Wednesday evening, or discussing causes and conditions that give rise to suffering and causes and conditions that give rise to well-being, peace, and compassion towards ourselves and others. It's a great deal of merit. Let us dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May the ripples of our time together ultimately find their way to them, so that they may be free of suffering, and may the merit and wisdom they accumulate help us realize our own Buddha nature, allowing us to be free, be liberated, and be of benefit to others. And for those who care to, you can join me in formal prayer. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.
Om Tare Tu Tare